What would you do if 21 enemy fighters suddenly flooded the sky around you and you were completely alone? On January 30th, 1944, a single Marine pilot flying an F4U Corsair dove straight into a swarm of Japanese aircraft over Rabaul. Outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time, what happened next didn't just defy combat doctrine, it sent shockwaves across the Pacific. At 6:15 a.m. on January 30th, 1944, the sky over Piva North Airfield was still stained with the last shadows of night. First Lieutenant Robert Hansen strapped into his F4U Corsair as 18 Grumman TB F Avenger torpedo bombers rolled into position ahead. They were heading for Rabaul, the fortress guarding Simpson Harbor, the most heavily defended target in the Pacific. Japanese intelligence counted 70 fighters stationed there, and 8 Marine Corsairs would escort 18 slow torpedo bombers straight into the hornet's nest. 43 Marine pilots had already been lost over Rabaul since November. Radar round every hill, anti-aircraft guns ringed the harbor. The enemy knew every approach, and sitting in that cockpit was a 23-year-old pilot with 21 confirmed kills in just 16 days. Hansen had arrived in the South Pacific in June 1943 with Marine Fighting Squadron 14, the Black Sheep. The India-born son of Methodist missionaries, a former wrestling champion in Lucknow, he wasn't loud or flashy. He was quiet and calculating. His first kill came August 4th, a Kawasaki Ki 60 won Tony over Vela Lavelle, and by the end of that month he had 2 victories. He was a veteran, but not legendary. Then came November 1st at Empress Augusta Bay during the Bougainville landings. 6 Japanese torpedo bombers bore down on American troops. Hansen attacked alone. He forced 3 to drop their bombs short of the beach. He shot down 3 more. A rear gunner's bullets tore through his canopy, shrapnel grazing his flight helmet, missing his scalp by millimeters. Blood blurred his vision, but he didn't break off. That day he returned with 5 confirmed kills, transforming overnight from veteran to ace. After that, his score climbed like an avalanche. November 11th, he shot down 2 zeros into Tony over Rabaul. November 18th brought 3 more, and by early December his personal tally had reached 15 confirmed kills. But the threat from Rabaul never diminished. The Japanese kept reinforcing, new pilots replacing old, but the defense system remained ironclad. January 3rd, Hansen down to over Rabaul. January 17th, 3 more. By January 24th, his record stood at 21 confirmed kills. He was just 5 away from Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record of 26. Then January 30 has arrived. The morning briefing was direct. 18 Avengers would strike Japanese shipping in Simpson Harbor. At Rabaul, 8 Corsairs would provide escort. The formation would depart Piva North, cross Bougainville Strait, fly north past New Ireland, and approach from the southeast. Hansen was assigned the high cover position at 12,000 feet, responsible for suppressing enemy fighters from above while the bombers made their run. Shortly after takeoff, 2 Corsairs turned back with mechanical problems. 6 continued toward the most heavily defended target in the Pacific. As the formation approached Rabaul, Japanese radar had already detected them. Anti-aircraft fire opened first, black bursts detonating around the formation. Then the fighters appeared, not a few, but swarms, zeros and Tonys pouring in from every direction, like a kicked hornet's nest. Bombers began their run, the Corsairs fighting desperately to protect them. Hansen orbited at altitude, watching the battle unfold below. He spotted 2 zeros creeping up behind the bomber formation, positioning for a kill shot on a straggling Avenger. He pushed the nose down and dove, speed surging from 250 to 400 miles per hour, the Corsair's engine screaming. He opened fire at 400 yards, all 650 caliber machine guns blazing. The zero's left wing root disintegrated, and the fuel tank detonated. But the second's arrow had already latched onto Hansen's tail. He hauled the stick and the Corsair rolled with startling speed. A high-speed split-S maneuver with minimal altitude loss shook the pursuit. But when he leveled out, he found himself separated from the formation. The radio crackled with confused calls, distress and warnings everywhere. He looked around and found no friendlies, just himself. Then he looked up. 20 Japanese fighters were diving from above like raptors spotting prey, Zeros and Tonys converging from multiple directions. Hansen's blood seemed to freeze. 1 against 20, no wingman, no cover, no escape. Rabaul behind, open ocean ahead, and death overhead. By any combat manual, the only correct choice was to dive and run, using the Corsair's speed advantage to escape. But Hansen didn't run. He pulled the nose up and charged straight into the oncoming Japanese fighters. This wasn't recklessness, it was a calculated decision. In 17 days of fighting them 21 times, he knew his enemy intimately. The Zero possessed unmatched maneuverability at low speed. Any attempt to dogfight was suicide, but in high-speed head-on attacks the Corsair's firepower, armor, and roll rate held absolute advantage. He just needed to hit and run, never linger. The first head-on pass, he opened fire at 600 yards, a 3-second window. Rounds tore through a Tony's engine cowling, flames erupting from the belly, the fighter tumbling away trailing smoke, 1 down. But there was no time to celebrate. The remaining Japanese fighters scattered and regrouped instantly, beginning rotating attacks. To feign Ting to draw attention while flanked from the sides, the rest waiting above, classic pursuit tactics with one purpose. Bleed his energy, reduce his speed, strip his altitude until there were no options left. Hansen understood the geometry perfectly. He continuously changed altitude and speed, refusing to give them any advantage, using the Corsair's superior roll rate to change direction at the last moment. Second engagement, a Zero closed to 300 yards from his right rear. Hansen rolled left and pulled, the Corsair snapping through 7 GS. His vision unduled gray at the edges, blood draining from his head, but he clenched his jaw and held consciousness. Zero's tracers passed through where he had been a heartbeat earlier, missing by inches. He reversed the roll and came back around. He fired at the Zero from 500 yards. 3 rounds struck the tail. The vertical stabilizer tore away. The fighter yawed violently and dove toward the sea. Down. But more were converging. 5 Zeros gathered behind him, their discipline tightening. The lead's Zero fired at 300 yards. Tracers walked up Hansen's left side. 1 round hit the canopy rail, another punch through the fuselage behind the cockpit. A third struck the landing gear door. The Corsair shuddered, hydraulic fluid streaming along the fuselage. He pushed the throttle to maximum continuous power, not war emergency yet. The engine temperature was already climbing. The cooling system had taken damage. Altitude read 7,000 feet and dropping. The Zeros were forcing him down toward 4,000 feet, their optimal fighting altitude where their maneuverability would dominate completely. The lead's Zero fired again. Hansen snapped hard right, 6 GS, 7, his vision tunneling gray, the burst missed. But another Zero slid into firing position at 280 yards. The ammunition counter read 900 rounds remaining. 18 rounds flashed past as Hansen rolled left, the tracers cutting through empty sky where he had been a second earlier. He reversed and pulled into a climbing turn. The 5 Zeros followed, coordinated now, rotating the attack, keeping constant pressure. Classic pursuit tactics: bleed his energy, reduce his speed, strip his altitude until there were no options left, and each second his margin for survival grew thinner. Hansen understood the geometry. He had studied Japanese tactics, fought them 21 times in 17 days. The answer wasn't evasion anymore, it was aggression. He pulled the Corsair into a vertical climb. Airspeed bled away. 300, 280, 270 miles per hour. The Zeros climbed with him, lighter, climbing faster. The distance tightened. 400 yards, 350, 300. At the apex, Hansen rolled inverted and kicked through a hammerhead turn. The Corsair hung for half a second, nose pointed skyward, then dropped. He was diving straight down at the 5 climbing Zeros, head-on closure rate nearly 700 miles per hour, 3 seconds to firing range. The Japanese pilots scattered to broke left to right. Once they'd committed, trusting his maneuverability, Hansen fired at 400 yards. Calculating deflection, in a split-second, blade angle, gravity drop, rate of climb, 20 rounds slammed into the Zero's engine. The cowling exploded. 3 down, but the pass cost altitude and speed. He leveled at 5,000 feet and barely 260 miles per hour. 4 Zeros regrouped. More joined them, 6 fighters now in disciplined pursuit. He pushed the throttle forward. The temperature gauge crept into yellow. At 320 miles per hour, he began a shallow 30-degree climb. Preserving energy, the Zeros matched him, to leading for trailing. At 8,000 feet, Hansen rolled right in dove, not to escape but to reposition, down 1,000 feet, then level, then a hard reversal. He charged straight back at them, another head-on pass, but now the Zero's worst act vertically, 2 at 8,000, 2 at 7,500, 2 at 7,000. Hansen leveled at 7,000 unaccelerated, targeting the lowest pair at 600 yards. Both sides opened fire simultaneously. Tracers filled the sky. Closure rate 680 miles per hour, 2 seconds to impact. His rounds tore through the Zero's wing root. The wing folded, the aircraft cart wheeled apart, for down, but return fires struck hard. 3 hits ripped across Hansen's right wing. Fabric shredded, metal twisted, the aileron control cable snapped. Rolling right became sluggish, delayed to half its former speed. 5 remaining Zeros saw the damage, saw the coolant leak, and pressed harder. Ammunition raid enough for one more extended fight. The temperature gauge slid into read. The engine was overheating. He could reduce throttle and let them close, or keep power in undrisk's easier. He chose power at 9,000 feet. He rolled left in dove toward the ocean. The Zeros followed at 400 yards and closing. Hansen leveled at 2,000 feet over dark blue water streaked with white caps. Maximum speed had fallen from 417 to 390 miles per hour. The Zeros were faster now. At 300 yards, the lead fighter fired a long burst. Hansen rolled left, the only direction the damaged aileron answered cleanly. The tracers missed, but his speed dropped to 360. The Zeros tightened to 280 yards. He entered a climbing defensive spiral. They followed with altitude, speed, and numbers in their favor. At 4,000 feet, Hansen reversed sharply, rolling left again. The damaged controls groaned. 2 Zeros overshot and flashed across his nose. He fired a 1-second burst, 50 rounds. The nearest Zero's tail section shredded. The aircraft snapped into a flat spin. 5 down. Ammunition dropped to 590 rounds. The gun camera captured it all. Without witnesses, kills risked becoming probables, and probables didn't count. The remaining 4 Zeros reformed instantly, 2 to his left, 2 to his right. Bracket formation, a classic trap closing in. If he turned left, the pair on his right would fire. If he turned right, the pair on his left would cut him apart. If he flew straight, both sides would close and unfinish it. The trap was airtight. Hansen chose the only direction they didn't tone up. He pulled vertical once more. Airspeed drained away, 300, 280, 260 miles per hour. The Corsair felt heavy and sluggish. The damaged right aileron dulled his control. At the top of the climb, he rolled inverted and tipped forward. But this time, he didn't dive back into the Zeros. Heat of southeast, away from Rabaul, away from the fight. The decision was made. The aircraft was too damaged, the engine failing, ammunition nearly gone. Continuing meant certain death. The 4 Zeros followed at first, 400 yards back, then 450, then 500. Hansen's dive built separation. At 600 yards, the Japanese broke off and turned home. Doctrine did not favor long pursuits. Fuel was limited. Their base lay behind them. Chasing a wounded course, 80 miles into open ocean, made no tactical sense. Hansen held his southeast heading. Airspeed 340 miles per hour. Altitude 3,000 feet. Distance to Bougainville 87 miles. Roughly 15 minutes if the engine survived. The temperature gauge was pinned in the red. Oil pressure dropped 60 pounds per square inch. Normal was 85. At 55, seizure became likely. He eased the throttle back slightly. Temperature fell to degrees. Oil pressure steadied at 58, barely holding. Airspeed dropped to 310. Flight time stretched to 17 minutes. Below him, the Pacific was empty, no ships, no friendly aircraft. If the engine failed, he would ditch alone. Fuel was not the problem. 90 gallons remained, more than enough. The engine was the ticking clock. 10 miles from Bougainville, oil pressure slipped again. 58, 56, 54, 50, bearings grinding dry. Ahead, green jungle and white beaches came into view. Peven or Therfield appeared beyond them, a thin strip of safety. Oil pressure hit 50. The engine began to knock, deep and rhythmic. 5 miles out, Hansen transmitted a brief emergency call. Aircraft damaged, engine failing. Request priority landing. The tower acknowledged instantly. Fire trucks rolled. He pulled the power down. Oil pressure 42. The engine shook violently. He pulled the emergency gear extension handle. 3 green lights confirmed the gear was down. He crossed the coast at 1,000 feet, 2 miles to runway. Oil pressure 38. The engine seized. The propeller froze. Silence. The Corsair became a glider. Altitude 900 feet, 1 mile left. Descent rate 800 feet per minute. He adjusted his glide carefully. To steep and he'd undershoot. To shallow and he'd overshoot. At 500 feet, he was aligned with centerline. Airspeed 110 miles per hour. Stall speed 87. At 100 feet, he flared gently. The main gear touched down 140 feet past the threshold. Perfect. The tail settled. The Corsair rolled 800 feet and stopped. Fire crews surrounded him. The aircraft looked shredded. 47 bullet holes, right aileron hanging by cables, fabric torn from the left wing. Engine cowling, blackened and cracked, oil coating the fuselage. Ground crews marked each impact with chalk, photographing everything. The intelligence officer arrived with a clipboard. How many enemy aircraft destroyed? Hansen reported 9, but claims required confirmation. Gun camera footage showed 3 clear kills. Witness statements on radio. Intercepts added 1 more. Final tally for confirmed victories. 2's Eros to Tony's, 5 others downgraded to probables, on paper 4, but in the sky over Rabaul it had felt like a war fought alone. For confirmed victories pushed Hansen's total to 25, tied for the highest score among active Marine Corps pilots in the Pacific. Just 1 behind Eddie Rickenbacker's World War, 1 record of 26. War correspondents flooded the airstrip that evening wanting interviews and photographs. By the next morning, Robert Hansen's name appeared in newspapers across the United States. That night, the squadron held a quiet celebration. Major Owens handed him an unofficial certificate naming him the top scoring course air pilot in theater, then pulled him aside and reminded him. 9 days, February 10th, transport to Pearl Harbor, tour complete. No more combat, time to go home. Hansen acknowledged the order, thanked him, walked back to his tent. 3 days later, February 3rd, 1944, he volunteered for another mission to Rabaul. The morning sky over Bougainville was clear. The briefing was routine. F4U Corsairs escorting 18 TBF Avengers to Raw airfield near Rabaul, strike the runway, destroy parked aircraft, return. Hansen wasn't scheduled to fly. He was supposed to be packing, but 1 pilot was incapacitated with severe food poisoning. The squadron needed a replacement. Bureau number 56039 had been repaired, engine replaced, aileron fixed, bullet holes patched. At 7:20 the formation departed Peven Orth. At 9 o'clock the Avengers struck Raw airfield. Bombs tore across the runway. Secondary explosions signaled fuel storage hits. 3 enemy aircraft shot down. No American losses. The formation turned southeast for home. The return carried them over Cape Street. George, the southern tip of New Ireland, a white lighthouse with a black cap stood prominently. More than a beacon, it served as a Japanese observation post surrounded by anti-aircraft batteries and radar installations. As the formation passed over Ka Bang Bay, Hansen broke formation. He rolled and dove toward the lighthouse. The other pilots called out over the radio. Hansen did not respond. At 1,000 feet, he opened fire. 650 caliber machine guns raked the tower, stones splintered, windows shattered. Japanese anti-aircraft guns answered instantly, 25mm and 40mm fire. Hansen pulled up from the strafing run. His right wing struck the water. The impact tore the wing from the fuselage. The Corsair cartwheeled violently. For a brief moment, the remaining wing generated lift and the aircraft climbed 50 feet, 100. Then fuel from the separated wing ignited. A fireball engulfed the aircraft. The canopy shattered. The fuselage twisted mid-air. For a second it seemed possible he might level out for a controlled water landing. Then the Corsair snap rolled inverted. It slammed into the ocean at 140 miles per hour. The aircraft disintegrated on impact. Debris scattered across 200 yards of water. The fuselage sank in immediately. No parachute appeared. No life raft deployed. No radio call was heard. Major Owen circled the crash site for 15 minutes. He saw only floating wreckage and a widening oil slick across the Pacific. The war diary entry for February 3rd was only a single cold sentence. Lieutenant Hansen did not return from this hop. Robert Murray Hansen was 23 years old, 1 day shy of his 24th birthday, 7 days away from sailing home. He was promoted to captain posthumously and awarded the Medal of Honor, the Navy Cross, and the Air Medal, his name inscribed on the wall of the missing at the Manila American Cemetery. In 1945, the destroyer USS Hansen was commissioned in his honor. The Marine Corps Aviation Association created the Robert M. Hansen Award, presented each year to the finest Marine fighter attack squadron, and it continues to this day. What is known as this: on January 30th, 1944, one Marine pilot attacked 21 fighters. He scattered their formation, directed 18 torpedo bombers, destroyed at least 4 enemy aircraft, and brought a dying bullet-riddled airplane home. 4 days later, he was dead. If you want more stories of incredible courage and sacrifice from history's most dramatic battlefields, smash that like button and subscribe to our channel. I am your battlefield chronicler, bringing the forgotten stories of courage back to life. Until the next mission, keep the faith and remember the fallen.